Hello, I'm Anika from Made to Sew and welcome to our quick and easy keyring tutorial. In this tutorial you should be able to make one of our lovely keyrings in about 15 minutes. Now we have appliqued the keyrings, which you're welcome to do, and we'll put a link to our appliqué tutorial in the description box below. Otherwise, go and collect up some scraps of fabric and let's get started. Start by collecting up the materials that you will need to create the keyring. You will need some fabric, and this is perfect for using up your scraps. If you wish to applique a letter onto your keyring, we will put a link to our applique tutorial in the description box below. You will need a medium weight interfacing, and we have interfaced the back of our fabric ready to go. You will also need some wadding, and this is just a 100% cotton wadding, and this just really gives a nice finish to the keyrings, but it is obviously optional. You will also need some matching thread, a template of some description, and we worked with a 2-inch 5 cm circle, which you're welcome to draw out, and I would recommend cutting it out in paper or card for ease. However, you can also download this from our website. You will need a keyring ring for the top of the keyring. And in terms of the equipment you will need, you want some pins, some scissors, a ruler. Some pinking shears would be fabulous because it does give a nice finish around the edge of the keyring, but again that is optional if you would prefer to trim that down with scissors. And a removable pen of some description. This one comes off with air or water, but chalk or even a pencil would work well. So collect up all your supplies and let's get started. Once you've chosen the fabric that you wish to work with for the keyring, you will need to think about whether you wish to applique a detail onto the front of it. If you do, you're welcome to follow our video, and a link to our applique video will be in the description box below. Then you'll need to think about the shape that you're working with. Now, the shape we used was this circle here, which is 2 inches or 5 cm circle. If you wish to use the same circle, you're welcome to either draw it out or download our templates, and we'll put a link in the description box below for that. Now, when you're cutting out your fabric pieces, you want to make sure that you've got a front and a back for your keyring, and you want to cut out squares that are bigger than the circle or the template that you're working with. So the squares that we used here were 3 inches, which is 7.5 cm square. And as long as they're larger than your circle template, that will be absolutely fine. I would recommend doing your applique in the center of it, because obviously we want to make sure that this is in the center of the circle when we have finished. Secondly, you will need to interface your fabric, both the front and the back of the keyring, and you will need to interface them on the wrong side using a medium weight iron-on interfacing. Now your bits of fabric are ready to go, we will also need to create a tab for the top of the keyring, and this is where the keyring ring will come out of the keyring. The tab needs to be 2 inches by 2 inches, which is 5 cm by 5 cm square, and this is cut out of your fabric. I will let you get all of these little pieces ready, and then we can start sewing. Start by working with your tab, which should be 2 inches square or 5 cm square. With the wrong side facing up, we're going to fold in either edges so that they meet in the middle. And we're going to give this a little bit of a press. Perfect. Now we should be looking at the right side of your fabric now, and you want to fold that in half again, and again give that a little press. Now I would take a pin and pin down this edge, making sure that your folded edges are sitting right on top of one another. And then you're ready to take this to the sewing machine. Sew 1/8 3mm from the edge of your tab. Start by sewing the edge that is folded, the 2 layers together and that we pinned together. And then you'll complete the same on the opposite side. Sew using a standard 2.5mm stitch length. You may find them difficult to start sewing, and they do wiggle about ever so slightly because they're very small going through the sewing machine. If you find it difficult to backstitch at the start and end, please tie off your threads instead. Once you've completed the first side, trim your threads and complete exactly the same on the second side. Once you've sewn both sides of your tab, you will need to trim your threads. Then you're going to need to fold it in half with the right side facing out. And you want to place your keyring ring onto it because you want to attach this before we actually sew it together. Now, to hold the keyring ring in position, we're just going to take this to the machine and sew backwards and forwards on this edge, literally just to hold the keyring in place and to make sure this doesn't move as we're sewing it into our keyring. Sew across the bottom edge of your keyring tab to hold the keyring in place, about 1/8, 3 millimeters away from the edge, backwards and forwards a couple of times. If you find your machine struggles with this, please use the hand wheel. Position your circle template onto the right side of your fabric and draw around it with a removable pen. If you're working with a appliqué figure, you will want to make sure that that sits in the center of your circle if possible. If you find it easier, you could always trace out your circle on tracing paper or something that you could see through so that you could make sure your figure was in the correct position on your circle. Now it's time to make the sandwich to sew our keyring together. You want to start with your bottom fabric for the keyring. That should be interfaced, and you want to position that wrong side facing up. If you wish to add wadding into your keyring, you want to take a piece of wadding, and we just used a 100% cotton wadding for our keyring, and you want to cut that a similar size square as we've done with the fabric, and that should sit on top of the bottom side of your keyring. Then you're going to take your right side, once you're happy with how you've drawn around your circle, and you're going to position that on top of the wadding, right side facing up. So you should have your right side facing out on both this side and the bottom side, with the wadding sandwiched in the middle. Next, you're going to need to attach the tab that we created. Now, this is going to need to sit behind your front layer, and you want to ideally position about 1/4 of an inch, 5 millimeters of the bottom of the tab underneath or in the keyring, and we're going to be sewing around this circle in a second, so you want to have about 5 millimeters or 1/4 of an inch of the tab passing that circle, and you should be able to feel that really. And again, you do also want to make sure that it is straight in line if you have got a motif that you have appliqued on. So make sure you're happy with the position of it. Then take some pins and we're going to pin it together. Place your pins through all of the layers to hold them together, and make sure you have a pin at the top edge here to hold the tab in the correct place. We're going to be sewing around your drawn circle, so obviously you don't want to get the pins in the way of that, and you do want to make sure that everything is nice and smooth so that you don't end up with any bagging layers when we have finished with this. Once you're happy with how you've pinned everything, you can join me at the sewing machine to start sewing. Once at the sewing machine, you're going to be sewing around the circle, the line that you drew around your template. Position the needle directly into that line and sew around this using a 2.5 millimeter stitch length. You will have to sew slowly and carefully to make sure that you're accurately stitching on your drawn line. You will need to take out the pins as you go to make sure that you don't catch those. Once you get to the tab, you want to make sure you really hold the tab in place so that it doesn't move out of position. And then you're going to continue sewing until you get back to where you started and sew over yourself with a couple of stitches instead of completing a back stitch. This will minimize the look of the back stitch and create a nicer finish. So once you've sewn around your template, you want to trim your threads and then take your pinking shears, as we're going to be cutting around the outside of your keyring. Now, when I use my pinking shears, I tend to try and cut as close to the stitching line as possible, and actually use the little triangles to line up almost with my stitching, so that I'm cutting as close as possible. You can complete that around the whole of the outside edge of the keyring, but when you get close to the tab up here, you need to do something slightly different. You'll have your top fabric, and you'll need to cut this separately, the top fabric of just fabric, to your bottom of your fabric and wadding, and you don't want to cut through the tab. So it's slightly more tricky. You might want to hold everything at the back out of the way and try and get as close to the top bit as possible. And the same with the back side here. Actually, I'm going to continue clipping around this edge first, and this is all of the layers together. And you just want to make sure when you pick up the pinks to do another row that you line up your triangles again so that they're always the same distance apart. Okay, so now we can get the two layers together, and this again is a little bit fiddly. I'm really holding back the front layer and the tab so that it's out of the way. And obviously you don't have to use pinking shears to do this. You're welcome to use normal scissors if you would prefer. And there you have it. Once you're happy with the pinking that you've completed, you can always work your way around and sort of tweak it if you would like to. And as I said, if you don't wish to use the pinking shears, you're more than welcome just to trim this down with an ordinary pair of scissors, especially if you're using a fabric that won't fray. And there you have it, your very own keyring. I really hope you've enjoyed this tutorial and learnt some new techniques. Thanks for watching.